Mother Orca telequa, right? This was 2018. You probably remember this photo. This is the iconic photo of all the journalism that I did at the paper around Mother Orca telequa. So she was the mother orca who lost her calf after only 1/2 hour. And I got a press release from the Center for Whale Research about this orca who lost her baby, and she was carrying it. She was carrying it on her head. We know orcas do this. This is something that actually a lot of the cetaceans do. These are very close-knit, intelligent family groups. And so the tone of this press release was, they do this, this has happened, and I thought, okay, I'm going to witness this. I'm going to stay with her. We, as a newspaper, are going to follow her throughout her journey. And we're going to raise up this issue that she's raising up about the southern resident orcas. And by the time we were done with that story, there were 6 million people reading about her around the world. There's never been anything, not even the Super Bowl, that has drawn that many readers to the Seattle Times. Now, why was that? It's because she was a mother who happened to be a whale. So she broke through the noise of just another endangered species or just random black and white wildlife out there. What she showed us, what she taught us, was that these are families. These are tight-knit family groups. This is the best way to think about the southern resident orcas, is they are an ancient society. Certainly here long before the settlers showed up, but even here before the first people. J. Julius at Lummi likes to say to me that they know our songs because they lived together in this place for so many years. The Lummi Nation and others in the Coast Salish tribes call them the Kultamastan, the people who live under the sea. That's the right way to think about these whales. They have language. The sounds they make, the J-Can L-pods, those are not random sounds. This is language, and it's passed down by family to family. They have greeting ceremonies. Their brains, proportioned to their body size, are one of the largest in the animal kingdom, especially the part here that's all about social relationships. Not only are they very smart, they're incredibly athletic and astonishing hunters. They are the top predator in the ocean. Nothing eats an orca, but an orca eats whatever it wants. And when you are an orca, what you eat defines who you are. It's one species in every ocean of the world. One species, but many types. And they define themselves in different ways, but primarily by diet, which is why for the southern resident orcas, salmon is the central issue. They co-evolved with Chinook salmon. Think about how much sense that made. Largest salmon in the sea, present in every season of the year. Of course, they specialized on Chinook salmon, the most calories for the hunting effort. And think what an effort that must be. They don't school, they have to chase them down in the dark, one at a time. And this is a worthy adversary. This is a fish that dives and twists and turns, goes into holes, and that orca follows it with its sonar beam in the dark, finding it with clicks. What a miraculous animal this is, and it coexisted successfully in these waters for so many years, and as a species, more than 6 million. So here we are, this little measly mammalian human, you know, just 150,000 years in here, even just a tiny little skin of time. And somehow we now find ourselves in this situation where 3/4 of the orcas, the mothers, are losing their pregnancies. Now, where is that? Look where they live. You would look at this and you think this has got to be paradise. And we know that it is, but we also know how much we've changed it. So when you're an orca and the main thing you need is salmon, and you need about 20 a day in order to swim 50 miles a day and burst swim 35 miles an hour, and even better, get pregnant and keep the baby and birth it, and then raise it on milk that's among the fattiest in the animal kingdom, you need food, and you need a lot of it. And so while this picture, which was taken in the San Juans with Mount Baker, Regal in the background, shows the paradise of this place, we also know the incredible challenges for salmon. So Seattle is a beautiful city, and it's more beautiful all the time. If you all haven't come down to see the new waterfront park, I hope you will. It is a generational triumph. But if you're a salmon, that doesn't look very good, does it? Nowhere to rest, nowhere to hide, nothing to eat, lots of noise. And so much of the central Puget Sound area looks like this. So much of this harbor is hardened. If you're a salmon, or for that matter, if you're a forage fish, what you really need are nice, soft, sandy beaches. And what you need are nice, big logs in rivers that are free-flowing. You need cold, clean water running downhill. I always say, this sounds so easy to me, really, all you need is gravity. And water that you let run that's actually cold, and you will have salmon. But right now, so much of our environment is so highly altered. And then there's this. So this is Roberts Bank, not far from where we sit. The coal port. Where's this going? We know this, don't we? This is the coal that's coming out of the Powder River Basin, and it's going to China, and it's going on nice diesel-burning ships. And in the foreground, that's Mother Orca Tahlequah with her baby calf. To me, this picture, which was taken by a volunteer at Soundwatch who was staying with her during daylight hours, that kind of said it all. You know, here she is, she's trying to survive in this place that we have altered so much with climate now, it's even changing the ocean food web. The copepods aren't fatty enough. The foods these animals need, the salmon, to eat when they need them, where they need them, aren't there. We're having these marine heat waves. Remember the last one? So this is where we are. And furthermore, these guys up in BC, these are the northern residents. So same animal. They only eat fish. They don't eat marine mammals. Northern residents. They're doing great. Their population curve looks like this. More babies every year. Why is that? Cleaner water, quieter water, bigger variety of fish, and they even get their own reserve. This photo is taken underwater at a fantastic little set-aside that's just for them. And they set it aside for them because of the pebbles that you see there, which are just the right size for rubbing their belly. And that's what they do. They come up on the beach, they force the air out of their lungs, and they scooch on the stones. And this little cove that they have that's just for them, you know, that's pretty special. And we haven't made anything like that for them here. These animals have their own set-aside place just to go rub on the pebbles. And it's a place where they play and they frolic. There's a lot of sex. There's a lot of all the good stuff. We don't have anything like that for the southern residents. We've never set anything aside just for them. The most we've ever done is kind of tamp down the whale watching a little bit. So, you know, we can do more. And we should be doing a lot more for them. And I think that the reason they matter so much and why we wrote a five-part special section, special sections, each one, why I wrote a book about it, honestly, you know, when people say to me, oh, the southern residents, they're so intelligent, they've got families, they're just like us. I think, don't flatter yourself, you know. I wish that we challenged ourselves to live with this animal in the way that they deserve, with their elegance, their diplomacy, their sacrifice, frankly. I mean, these animals stick together for life as families. I don't know about you, but a long 3-day weekend can be a little long. So these are remarkable mentors for us, and I think we should think about them that way. And I think we can also really be instructed by the way the native people think of them here, the people who live under the sea. They're not separate, they're not apart, they're not like options that we'll sort of think about if it's convenient for us. They have a right to be here. The next thing I want to talk about is the interconnections between the uplands and the water. I love this postcard. So this piece of art, for me, said it all. These orcas in the forest. Salmon are actually creatures of the forest. We don't often think about them that way. We think about them in rivers, we think about them in streams, we think about them in the ocean. But what we really need to understand is that salmon are also in the trees. That's not a metaphor, and it's not woo-woo talk. It's hard science. I learned this in my most recent book, which is called The Trees Are Speaking, Dispatches from the Salmon Forests. And what that book did was teach about how, for instance, a scientist I talked to in British Columbia pointed out that on the Adams River in BC, in a year when they have a really big salmon run, they can see it from space in satellite photographs because the canopy is greener. That's salmon seen from space. Secondly, if you core the trees in the riparian zone in a salmon river, you will see that the bigger runs correlate with bigger rings in that tree's growth. The fat years, the juicy years, the years that tree could really release and grow, correspond to the nitrogen and the phosphorus that's coming home from the sea in the bodies of those beautiful fish, mediated by wildlife. And so it's a beautiful connected triangle of the trees and the salmon and the bears and the otters and the martens, all the other little varmints and beasties that love to feast on these salmon carcasses. There's so much nutrition in those fish. They leave here this big and they get all their body size out in the ocean, and then they come back to us. And if we let it, this is a cycle of goodness that will go on uninterrupted forever. And so when we think about what we need if we want more orcas, we actually need more trees. This is a really big tree. That's Jerry Franklin, one of the world's eminent forest ecologists. And I have him there mainly in that picture for scale. Look at that thing. These big trees, you have to recognize that's what used to be here everywhere, right? I mean, we've all seen the fantastic Darius Kinsey photos of the logging of the Northwest and why anybody lived through doing it with hand tools and so forth, and a lot of people didn't. But taking these trees and converting these forests to plantations, which is a lot of what's happened in our territory, changes everything. These big trees, when they are along the streams and the rivers, they hold the banks, they prevent erosion, they shade the streams. Not only that, but there's an immense amount of food that's coming down out of the trees, leaf litter, needles, insects, all sorts of juicy, delicious stuff that's feeding the little fish. So when we do this, this will never be a forest again. This is now a plantation. It's a farm for growing a crop, usually herbicided next, and then planted with a monoculture, and it will never be a forest again. It's now its highest value is profit, usually for distant investors. This is a financialization of nature. This is a full-on commodification of what was a robust natural system, which, if carefully stewarded, as the first people still do and did, could be used over and over again forever, rather than just cutting it down and sending it off as money in a bank. I love wood products. I live in a wood house. I write books. I write with a pencil on paper. I'm a wood pig, you could say. I love wood. But I also believe that we can't do any more of that. Talking to Jerry Franklin there in the picture, he's a quiet, elegant man, but he was angry when he was talking to me about this. And he said, we were fooled, we foresters. This is not forestry, this is now farming. And this will never be a forest again. And what we cannot continue to do is convert these natural forests, diverse natural forests, to plantations. That we can't do any more of. So if you want to talk about keeping salmon and keeping orcas, we also need to take care of our forests. The other thing we need to do is learn from, listen to, and if you don't yet know them, get to know your indigenous neighbors. So this is Shannon Wheeler. He's the chairman of the Nez Perce tribe, and that's me interviewing him standing on Dworshak Dam, which was built within their reservation lands. And it's a total block to all of the salmon that would be going up into so many miles of territory. And what Shannon was talking to me about in this interview was taking out the lower Snake River dams to try to bring salmon back into their territory. They signed a treaty, as did all of the Stevens Treaty tribes, including the Lummi right here, that guaranteed their right to fish forever in their territories. And that obviously is not happening. I would say this to you, if there's one thing that we could do as a society that would put our environmental management back on the right course, it would be to honor the treaties. These are the most powerful environmental documents. These are the most powerful environmental documents this country has ever signed. And they were signed yesterday. 1855 is yesterday. And these treaties have rescued us from so much. Right here in Bellingham, you do not have the world's largest coal port, do you? You almost did. And the reason you don't is because the Lummi Nation fought to defend their treaty-protected fishing rights. It is the only time in 30 years of reporting I heard about the Corps of Engineers calling up a tribal chairman and saying, that EIS, forget it. We're just done. Remarkable. And it was because of the leadership of the Lummi Nation that that didn't happen. You know, the rest of us, we can like write a letter or something. But the tribes have taken a leadership role in this region on the east side of the mountains and on the west side on some of the toughest environmental issues of our day. And if we do our part in honoring the treaties and honoring their voices, it will make a big difference. It already has. So these lives, these baby orcas and their mothers, are 100% in our care. And what I want you to know is they can do it. These are among the most intelligent, most powerful animals on Earth. And if they have what they need, they can take care of the rest. This is Mother Orca Tahlequah with one of her subsequent calves. She went on to successfully have more calves. This calf, by the way, is grown up and is still living. I want you to notice something about this photo. Can you see it? What's that? It's a salmon. Okay, so this animal is still nursing. Is it just like pretending to be a grown-up orca? Is this the equivalent of its teddy bear? Look at the affection between these two. Look at that family. Let it enter your heart and think about our responsibility for the non-human beings with whom we are so privileged to share this place. I want to talk about our public lands. So this is yours truly sitting on a stump in what's obviously a burned forest. I want to talk some more about forestry because I think that we are in a very pivotal time right now in Washington State. We just had an election. Dave Upthegrove was elected Commissioner of Public Lands. And he was elected on a vote to stop cutting old and mature forests. Not old growth, that's already protected. But the older stuff, 90, 100, 125-year-old trees. In other words, the old growth of tomorrow. Why is that important? It's important because right now, trees are taking 25% of the fossil fuel emissions that we put out into the world into their tissues, into their leaves, their roots, the wood. They are doing 25% of the job. Granted, we need to do the other 75 and we're not doing it. But we need every tree. We need every tree. The reason I chose this picture to show you is I'm sitting in the H.J. Andrews Experimental Forest. This is protected public land. It's right outside of Eugene, Oregon. It's a scientific research forest, and it burned 2 summers ago for the first time in 500 years. So 3/4 of this forest is old growth. Precious Douglas fir, hemlock, you can imagine the cedars. And for that forest to burn tells you something. And what it told me is that even in protected areas, we're losing some of our most precious old growth forests. At this point, honestly, logging feels almost quaint to me, at least as something we have control over, that you can turn up or down, do it here, don't do it there. But we have unleashed forces of climate and hot drought and insects and bugs and disease in our forests. We're in a situation now where the climate we've created and the forests we have created cannot coexist. And really nothing other than a paradigm shift will save them. What do I mean by a paradigm shift? That is business as usual. This is Department of Natural Resources land outside of Elma, Washington. This was taken just a year ago, so this isn't ancient history. This is an absolutely standard business as usual photograph. So is this. So the standard practice on DNR lands is leaving 5 trees per acre. That's not very much. And you know what? They're better than a lot of other organizations. This forest, Evergreen Gold is the name of the cut. This was protested by a new I won't call it an anti-logging group, but I will call them a pro-forest group. This is the Legacy Forest Defense Coalition. Brand new grassroots group, started up just about 5 years ago. What they did that was so smart was they started taking pictures of these forests and putting them up on their website and causing people to ask themselves, really? I didn't know we were cutting forests like this in Washington, public lands. Forests like that, that'll clearly be the old growth of tomorrow if we leave it stand, but you know by that blue stripe, that tree's not gonna be there. So here's the thing, this is a jobs issue. It's a local rural economy issue. I can say this because I'm not from here, I'm from New York. I can't believe we cut down our forests to buy things like ambulances and Hoquiam. If Hoquiam needs an ambulance, buy them the ambulance. But I can't believe we have this third world taxing system in Washington state where the choice is cut down the trees because we need the revenues for local communities. How can that be? Well, maybe it might have something to do with the fact that we still run this place like a frontier hot dog stand. We don't even have an income tax. So, like I said, I'm from New York. We have all kinds of really useful things called taxes, tolls, time of day pricing, tools that communities use to manage growth, take care of people, build schools, do all the things that need to be done everywhere without doing this. Every one of those is a DNR tree, you know by the red dot of paint. This is a DNR cut. See all the ones in the background? So this is what we're doing, and we've been doing it for 100 years. And my question for you all is what is going to change as we go forward in time, in a climate and biodiversity emergency, in a state that actually has plenty of money, if people would figure out how to access it for the public good. Now let's talk about hatcheries. Hatcheries are important tools, and it's a sad fact that we need them. In the Columbia River, a place that I've spent a lot of time paying attention to, and in Puget Sound, a place we all care very much about, most of the runs are hatchery fish, like 80%, often higher, which means if you were to shut off the hatcheries, you wouldn't have anything for tribal harvest, you wouldn't have anything for sports fishing, the orcas wouldn't have anything to eat. So it's not something that we can just shut off, but it comes at a cost. I took this photo at the Issaquah salmon hatchery. We thought, well, that'll be fun. We'll take the grandkids and we'll go to the Issaquah salmon hatchery and they can all learn about that. Well, the kids were freaked out at all the violence and all the blood, actually. This is a bucket of eggs. But, there was this, too, the little workstation where they're cutting off the heads. And, the work itself it's industrial processing. And the thing I want to say about this is it's possible to go too far. It's possible to forget what you're actually doing. These are animals. They're individual lives. And I think to the extent that we have turned all of this into a kind of organic machine rivers pumping out digits of fish for a certain targeted harvest level, rather than thinking about the places which need to be curated and healed and brought back to life so that we can manage for abundance rather than just trying to beat extinction. I think that the hatchery tool, which we started using earlier than almost anybody and built bigger than just about everybody, is something to think about. It has a brutalizing effect. It's been used to substitute for habitat. It's been used as a reason why we can build a dam named Elwha. It started with Elwha. So I think that the hatchery tool has to be rethought. And the habitat tool, taking care of these landscapes and not doing this, is crucial. Now I want to talk about the connected ecosystem that is the Salish Sea. We need to think about the connected landscape of these waters and of these lands. Here in Washington, where, as you've just heard me say, we have a lot of things we need to do better, it's nothing compared to our neighbors. So this is called Big Lonely Doug. It's the only old-growth Douglas fir left in this clear cut. You see the fuzzy little stuff coming up in the background. You see Joshua right there like a little ant on the shoulder of that tree. You want to talk about scale. So they're still cutting old growth in BC. They're down to just the very last remnants. This is a typical clear cut. It's something that can't and shouldn't be happening, and it is still happening, and it's happening on unceded lands. I went to go talk with the Montaguela people and the Nuchatlet people and some reporting for the paper about salmon parks. This is an initiative of the Nuchatlet people. They went to court to sue to regain their right and title. Notice I said regain. They never surrendered it. They never fought a war with us. They never signed a treaty. And so they basically went to court and said, what are you doing here? You know, all this industrial logging that's going on their territory. And so they took their case to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court of BC came back with the old argument of terra nullius. There was nobody there when we showed up. There was nobody there. So you know what they did? They put the trees into the testimony. Bark-scarred trees that showed usage of the forest by their people going back 600 years and more. The trees themselves told the story. They spoke of the long presence of the Nuchatlet people on the land. They won that case, and they're going back for a bigger piece of right and title in their territory. So, you know, they shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't still see clear cuts like this, because they're so terribly costly to the environment, to the salmon, to the orca, to the climate. But you know what else? It's also costly to us. So if you look closely, and this is probably going to be hard to see in this light, but there are some people inside here. Suzanne Simard, for one, who's a scientist that I spent a week with up in BC, and a couple of the field crew. Notice I said a couple. There are 3 people inside that caved-in cedar trunk. That's how big the hole is in there. I got to imagine it's a wonderful bear's den in the wintertime. What human delight we have and feel when we're in an intact, whole ecosystem. We play, we laugh, we feel good. I was just up in the Arctic for a reporting trip to work on a piece about the call to open up the Arctic, millions of acres of land, to oil and gas extraction. I flew in a bush plane for 2.5 hours over nothing but uninterrupted, perfect tundra, marked only by caribou trails. That was a life-changing experience to realize here, right here in our country, in Alaska, we still have this incredible Serengeti. Caribou were running under our little plane. It was very small, by the way, with wings full of gasoline. I was a little worried about that. It's one of those now or never things, right? You're going to get in the plane or you're not. I got in. Grizzly bears running. So we still have these things here, and they're worth fighting for. Let's talk about what's better, because there is a lot of better. So we've had some pretty good salmon runs in the last couple of summers. The chum run in the Hood Canal was gonzo. It was great. The sockeye in the upper Columbia River, by the way, they're headed to BC, had record years back to back. And so it is possible in these places where we manage water better, where we do a lot of habitat work, to revive salmon. The Elwha, still closest to my heart because it was the first, and in its day, the largest dam removal ever anywhere in the world. It was only about 10 years ago, and already we have salmon coming back like gangbusters. We have the largest run of summer steelhead anywhere on the Olympic Peninsula. The coho are coming back strong. The Chinook run is getting better. But my very favorite part is seeing on the wildlife cameras that the Lower Elwha tribe has out there in the forest, pictures of cougar taking coho out of the river. I love that because that shows it's truly becoming a full watershed recovery. Not only fish, not only the river, but the forest and the forest animals are beginning to benefit from this dam removal project, and it's only been 10 years. The tribe has been out now for their first ceremonial subsistence fishing, and they're going to go out again on Indigenous Peoples' Day. So that is a triumph for this country. It was an act of Congress, and it was followed through by the local Port Angeles community and many, many, many scientists who came together to make this happen, and it's working. And I think the thing I want you to take with you as we talk about what's working is every single one of these things that I'm going to mention was an act of collective action. Here's another one. Remember this? Cypress Island, the big fish farm collapse. Well, we got rid of fish farms in Washington. That was a huge effort. It took multiple years and multiple lawmakers and administrators and staff people and tribes to make it happen. But it did happen. First, the state legislature banned net pen farming for non-native species. And then Hillary Franz, the Commissioner for Public Lands before Dave Upthegrove, banned net pen farming, period, on state lands. So that's an amazing triumph, and we'll see what happens going forward. I will tell you that nothing's ever forever, right? Remember Hetch Hetchy? That was built in the national park. So nothing's ever forever, and the people who want to use these lands and these waters for net pen farming will always be back. But this was taken care of. And it was a big deal. Remember? That was a big escape. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Atlantic salmon. And we were told, oh, it won't be a problem. They'll all die. They'll all go away. Scott Schuyler of the Upper Skagit tribe took me fishing 50 miles away 6 months later to show me the Atlantic salmon he was catching. So there you go. Okay, no more fish farms. This is a single drop of water from Puget Sound that I'm looking at in my study under my microscope. Look at it, it's alive. This is so important. These are copepods. These are all the little tiny things that feed everything else. This is zooplankton and phytoplankton. And Puget Sound is cleaner today than it has been in generations. This is an absolute triumph of public management. Our elders decided to tax themselves to build modern sewage treatment to clean up Puget Sound. Of course, the Clean Water Act. Of course, the CSO management. All these things that we've been doing to take our pressure off these waters and let them be clean and let them be full of life. It was so thrilling to me to see what's in a single drop of water. But from the most minute things to the biggest things, the great whales are back. The southern residents are an absolute exception because of the problem with salmon. But So many of the whales and other marine mammals are back in numbers that have not been seen in generations. Even humpbacks have become a common sight. This is remarkable, and the reason that they're living is because we stopped killing them. The Marine Mammal Protection Act in the 1970s has been making a difference. Finally, smart people. So many smart people, so many scientists. Science needs your support. As you know, right now, science is under attack, universities are under attack, journalism is under attack, artists are under attack. This is a time to stand up for science, because life is not going to get any simpler. The tasks ahead are not going to get easier. It's absolutely essential that we have the science we need to guide the way. This is Joe Gatos from the Sea Dock Society, one of my favorite people. And we're out there on the water. Actually, what we were doing that day was dropping hydrophones in the water and recording the noise made by container ships bothering southern resident orcas. So, you know, we like to talk about how smart we are and how good we are at solving problems, but never forget who else we share the water with. Giant Pacific octopus, just one example. Look at that thing, giving me the stink eye. Wow. I was rambling around the aquarium, the Seattle Aquarium, for something, a story, and I crossed this tank for this animal that's just been brought in from Nia Bay. It's going to be on exhibit for a couple years, and then they're going to take it back out and release him back into the wild. And he's sitting there kind of like this, isn't he? Like, yeah, I'm on this side of the glass now, but just you wait. So, you know, we live amid a vast intelligence, and this is a great and immense privilege, and we must live up to it. Thank you.
Schwartz. Thank you, Lynda.
Welcome, Harvey.
Question. The southern resident orcas just eat salmon. If the salmon were gone tomorrow, could they or would they eat birds or mammals?
Well, that's a great question, and it's one that's tortured me for a long time. My husband always says, oh, they should just eat cheeseburgers. They're not going to do that, guaranteed. It's fascinating to me that they are so adamant about their food choices. Not only the southern residents, but all the orcas, no matter where they live. They eat only what they eat, and they eat nothing else. When they're born a blank slate. Their mother teaches them what food is. And that's just kind of how it goes. I mean, my mother used to say to me, oh, if you're hungry enough, you'll eat anything. And so I've always been, frankly, myself, a little stunned that they won't just take a bite. Try a seal, please, there's so many. You know, but it's just they're profoundly cultural animals. And I'm wondering, this is a question I have about this, L25, my totem animal, she's the oldest of all the orcas in the world that we know of. She was born, we think, in the 30s, which puts her close to 100. What will happen when she passes? There's a 40-year gap to the next animal. Will someone experiment? Everyone's kind of holding their breath. You know, these are matriarchal cultures led by the oldest whales. So she's the queen bee, she's the old lady whale. I think I'm going to write a memoir called that, Old Lady Whale. You know, this is a real tough one for me, too. It's so frustrating to me because I want them to live and I want them to thrive. And there's plenty of marine mammals, but they just won't eat them. Your question, what if all the salmon went away? Maybe then would they eat them? Well, let's think about the capture era. Painful as it is. There was a time when there were some transient Biggs killer whale, marine mammal eating killer whales in a pen. The captor was waiting to move them to where they were headed, SeaWorld or somewhere. There was no understanding of the fact that they eat marine mammals and they won't eat fish. And so he keeps pitching salmon in their pen, and pitching salmon in their pen, and pitching salmon in their pen. And day goes by, and they get thinner, and days go by, and they get weaker. Finally, death's door time, the young one takes a salmon and takes it up to the mother, and they each share half. This is a true story. We also know that in captivity, they eat whatever they're fed because they don't have any choice. They also get interbred with other orcas, which they would never do from other clans. So they're profoundly cultural animals. They're not at that desperate place yet. I hope they never get there. The only time we've ever known it to happen is when they either had no choice or they were forced. So I would regard this as their identity and their sovereignty. And I see it as our job to let them be who they are.
Your presentation was fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My question is about ocean acidification. What's happening in the Salish Sea, and how does that affect the orcas and the salmon?
So ocean acidification is so real, it's scary, and it's particularly profound in Puget Sound because of the shape of the bathymetry and all our little coves and bays that hold the water, and it doesn't exchange as violently as it would in a more open setting, such as the West Coast. One of the people who's done a lot of marvelous work on this is Jan Newton at University of Washington. She's an oceanographer, and she did some of the pioneering work about ocean acidification and just how serious it is, especially in Puget Sound. So what it is a change, of course, in the pH of seawater. And so animals that make calcium basic pH shells, whether it's a snail or a pteropod or all these other important animals, including, by the way, zooplankton that have little tiny shells, are at risk when the pH starts to literally pit and even dissolve them. And this is actually happening. And so, you know, what is this about? I hate to say it. It's climate. It's all the carbon that we're putting into the atmosphere, and most of it is actually going into the ocean as the ocean mixes with the atmosphere. And so you have this enormous amount of carbon that's in the seawater that's changing the very pH of the seas. You would have thought that puny little people couldn't be that powerful to actually change the pH of the ocean, but especially in a place like Puget Sound, it is happening. And it has immense implications for the food web and the animals that depend on all these other little animals. What will it mean for the crab fishery? What will it mean for shellfish? We're one of the largest shellfish producers in the world. Taylor Shellfish has already started raising their oysters in Hawaii to get away from our acidic waters. What does that tell you? So it's interesting, we put out a report on ocean acidification. This has to be more than 10 years ago. And the reporter, Craig Welch, who did a masterful job, and the photographer, Steve Ringman, who did a masterful job, gave it the perfect title, Sea Change. So.
We seem to know a lot of information about what the problems are, but nobody's really moving towards solutions. But I think the indigenous people are more solution-oriented, and I have heard that they have, of course, they've made a lot of progress using their treaty rights. But I've also heard that they want to stop motorboats on the Salish Sea, and I just feel that we need to consult with them. I consider them the experts because all the PhDs in the world haven't really fixed it. And I also wonder about fixing it. Can we develop ecotourism like they do in many areas? Because we do have a little bit of ecology left, and we could sell that to the people that destroyed theirs.
Yeah. So on the point about motorboats, I doubt that. Every Indian I know loves their boat. So I can't imagine that happening. But on ecotourism, sure, especially if it's done right. I mean, there's a fair amount of this going on already in Washington state, but there certainly could be more. In some ways, we hold ourselves back by keeping our ferries on a starvation diet. You know, some of these places people would like to go are very hard to get to, and you mostly want to go there. So, you know, I am heartened by some of the things that I've seen happening, including, by the way, being led by the tribes in terms of tourism. By the way, there's a fantastic network of tribal museums. And if you have not been to these places at Nia Bay, at Grand Ronde, at Muckleshoot, you must, because it's a fabulous way to begin your education, and it can be a nucleus for your explorations. And pay attention to when things like Macaw Days are happening, when the Coast Salish canoe journeys occur. 30 days of canoes on beaches and feasting and oratory. We have opportunities in Washington to get to know one another better than we ever have, and also to welcome visitors. And I think ecotourism is absolutely the way to go if it's done carefully and well. That was a big clause, if it's done carefully and well.
Thank you so much for what you've shared with us tonight. Some of your recent reporting that I've really enjoyed is your reporting on DNR that captures both the ecological and the human element. And thinking about your reporting on the old growth of tomorrow 6 months ago or so, could you wade into policy waters and comment on Dave Up the Grove's 77,000 acres proposal?
Yeah, happily. So Dave Up the Grove is a really interesting man. He comes from the policy side, and he's actually a natural resources professional. This is wonderful news for Washington. We haven't had a commissioner with that much background in the sciences and in ecological principles since Jennifer Belcher. So this is a wonderful opportunity for Washington. He is also a person very respectful of process. So he was not willing to overturn this slate of sales that Hillary Franz pushed through in December, right before leaving office, which I think was really disrespectful of the voters. Because by that time, Dave Up the Grove had been elected. It was very clear what the voters' direction and choice was, and yet she pushed through these sales. So, you know, what Dave Up the Grove did as soon as he took office was say he was not going to overturn what his predecessor had done. But he was going to take 6 months and look at the landscape, DNR's landscape, and decide what to do. But the 77,000 acres that he decided to set aside is a rather small amount, and we're losing an awful lot that really should have gotten another look. I've seen a lot of those forests. They're very special places. And I think if most of the people in this room went for a walk in those forests, you'd say, oh, I don't think so.
With this avalanche of executive orders that have been coming out from the Trump administration, it's just unbelievable. Do you have any thoughts and suggestions of what we can do besides try to comment on all these executive orders?
I do, very specifically. It's time to warrior up, honestly. I mean, yeah. Each one of these executive orders is only that. Executive orders are not legislation. They don't wipe existing environmental laws off the books. Very often, a lot of this is just red meat for the base, and it won't ever turn into anything. Let's talk about the order, for instance, to up the cut on national forest lands by 25%. Okay, so they just got rid of a lot of the people who work in the Forest Service. So who in the world is going to even put out the paperwork for those sales? You have National Forest Service offices without any hydrologists, without any biologists. I mean, it's literally that bad. And so they've cleaned house, and the people would have to work up the sales that they want to do. And there is still the Environmental Policy Act, and there's still the Endangered Species Act and the Clean Water Act. These things don't just go away. And so one thing to know for sure is to be paying attention when these sales start coming out of your local Forest Service office. And they should be litigated. If they're illegal, you know, most of these sales, either they don't have the people to do it or they're illegal. The maps that came out with that executive order, there was a group called Oregon Wild, a nonprofit, and they did the hard work of actually looking at those lands that were outlined in these maps and putting them on actual maps. They were so sloppy. There were wetlands on those maps. There were tribal lands on those maps. There were mountains on those maps. There were wilderness areas. So, you know, a lot of this stuff was pushed out in an absolute avalanche in these first days. And, you know, we can talk about the Total Energy Dominance Act. We can talk about so many of these executive orders. And what it is now upon all of us to do is to pay attention and do the necessary work that people in this state have always done. The Northwest Forest Plan, protecting 24 million acres, is up for an update. What do you think that could possibly look like? So it is a time to be very vigilant and do the job of being a citizen that's been going on since Teddy Roosevelt in the 1900s, working against the people he called the graspers. This is not a new fight. This is an old fight, and it's the same fight, and you just need to keep doing it.
Hi, Lynda. It's always a privilege to be here with you. I was wondering if you would like to share what words or advice you have for folks who are interested in specifically environmental journalism and writing in that field in the face of journalism as it stands today, and what advice you would give folks who are experiencing severe burnout from the especially emotional aspect that's coming out of this field.
So the best antidote to burnout is actually giving. I'm going to say that again. The best antidote to burnout is actually giving. Do something for a neighbor, do something for a colleague, do something for a family member, and you will instantly feel better. Do something for your community and you will feel less helpless and you will feel less sad. And it can be the smallest thing, and it works every day. The other thing I would say is that if you ever feel sorry for yourself, call up Daryl Hilaire at the Lummi Nation and he'll laugh. He'll say, oh, okay, you're feeling a little run over, huh? Yeah. Look, the point is, if they can do it, we can do it.
Hi, Doug Coe, Lummi Island. From time to time I read about restoration projects and was wondering, what's the interest level in the state legislature on projects of that nature with respect to salmon habitat restoration? And is it the same bipartisan schism that we see in every other issue that makes sense?
Yeah, no, I would say the interest is extremely high, and I would encourage you, but this is when I get back in my whole big tax rant. There's not enough money, God damn it, and there should be. And as long as the orcas and the salmon have to compete against everything and everything else, they will never win. This is a funding problem. I don't know anyone who doesn't want to do more for salmon and the habitat. And the best thing about it is it actually works. And we know that it works. It's worked everywhere we've done it. So honestly, we do have the initiative process in this state. And I've long thought it was time for an orca salmon habitat initiative, funded with, I don't know, a tiny tax on third homes. What do you think? This is a poem, it's an excerpt from a poem by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. Do not lose heart. We were made for these times. Yes, for years we have been learning, practicing, been in training for, and just waiting to meet on this exact plane of engagement. I recognize a seaworthy vessel when I see one. There have never been more able vessels in the water than there are right now across the world. And they are fully provisioned and able to signal one another as never before in the history of humankind. There will always be times when you feel discouraged. I too have felt despair many times in my life, but I do not keep a chair for it. I will not entertain it. It is not allowed to eat from my plate. I hope you will write this on your wall. When a great ship is in harbor and moored, it is safe. There can be no doubt, but that is not what great ships are built for.